Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Eric Brooker, a dear friend of mine. Eric, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you again.
I know it's been a year. We spoke about a year ago. We did a couple of podcasts and we were at an event together. A lot has happened. I follow your post religiously. You've been traveling, you've been writing, you've been advising, you've been active. Before we get started, though, I would love to have you introduce yourself a little bit, just for those who haven't met you so far, and then we'll deep dive into what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to come and join you again. I got great feedback from our last conversation and your insight, not just what I have to offer. Been in the tech space for 26 years, been in the TSD channel for about half of that. I have had some success as an author, a podcast host myself, and started a consulting practice about 3 years ago, generally helping suppliers navigate the TSD ecosystem from a recruiting perspective, from a best practices perspective, as well as a platform perspective.
So we're going to spend a lot of time on AI at the back end of this conversation, but I want to start with the human side of things. I know one of the main themes that you have had, we talked about it last time, and it comes across quite strongly through your writing and posts and messages that you share, is that the channel has been architected for transactions, not really for relationships. What do you mean by that, Eric?
It's interesting, right? We are in a relationship business, which sort of goes against what you just said. But the business itself, the model, the tools in particular have been really built for transactions. The TSDs built their tools intentionally, and they work really well for what they were designed to do. They were designed to support their own advisors within their own ecosystem. And the problem itself isn't a bad design. The problem is the average trusted advisor today. It's funny, my last call was with a TSD. The average trusted advisor today works with 2.8 TSDs. So, what portal do you open? When do you open it? How do you know which supplier across those 2.8 ecosystems is actually the best fit for the channel? There's not yet been a tool that was built to answer these questions because there's not a single TSD that should have built it, and the ecosystem has really outgrown the tools that are out there today.
From an architecture perspective, you not only just talk about platform, you also talk about culture and leadership. But before we get into that, for those of you who may not be familiar with the word TSD, I know we spent a lot of time last year double clicking on that, but would you please take a minute or two, define what that word is, roughly high level, what that ecosystem is, and then we'll get into this culture and leadership that you think is missing.
Yeah, the closest analogy would probably be to the insurance industry. So nobody goes to, in most cases, they don't go to the insurer directly. They go through a broker. And TSD, formerly known as Master Agent, TSD is Technology Solutions Distributor. They are a group of effectively brokers that hold contracts with today nearly 1,200 suppliers of technology. Think in the as a service business, anything from internet access, SD-WAN, unified communications. And there's hundreds and hundreds of different technology types that fit within the TSD community. And then there's a subcategory, for lack of a better term, and maybe for a visual, that sit under the TSDs, and that is the group of sellers, the people that are actually in the field. So the TSDs hold the contracts, often provide some tools to help the sellers, what we call the trusted advisors, navigate the ecosystem. And they have access to all of those suppliers. Again, the roughly 1,200 that are out there today.
In some of your recent posts, you have talked about this market structure and supplier visibility problem. And I'm going to read out an exact number that you shared. You said 754 suppliers across 4 major TSDs, that you found that no single distributor covers more than 59% of the total supplier market, right? So If that is the case, how is an advisor making recommendation today?
We've had hundreds of questions over the last, or we've asked, I should say, hundreds of that question hundreds of times over the last 18 months or so, and the feedback is consistent. We choose a TSD, we hitch our wagon to them early and hope for the best, which reminds me of my old boss, Sean, who used to say, Eric, because at the end of the month, he'd ask for a forecast and I'd give him a number and I'd say, I hope ZINFI closes this month. And he'd say, Eric, hope is not a strategy. The other model, which we have heard countless times, is memory. I've had a good experience with them in the past, or I called my engineer at the TSD and they had a good experience with them. There's not an unbiased data source that strips the suppliers of all of their sales and marketing material and actually looks in an unbiased fashion at what's out there today and tells you why someone is the right fit. That doesn't exist today. And having just gotten off the phone with a TSD, I've now had two in the last week, two TSDs tell me, Eric, but we have something similar. And sure, but as they have told me, their platform is inherently biased because it only has the suppliers that they offer. And you talked about the lack of overlap that creates inconsistencies on, is it what's best or is it what that one TSD has? And if you look at two or three TSDs and you get three distinctly different answers, how do you know which of those three distinctly different answers is the right answer?
How do we get here to this? In 2026, you would think there would be a marketplace where everybody and everything would be listed. Like, what is there a force behind this that's trying not to make it visible, or it's just happened? It's an happenstance.
I think it would be conjecture at best to say there's a force behind the invisibility. But again, the TSD portal model worked exactly as it was designed. Each TSD built a tool to serve their own advisors. Again, now we've got not 50 suppliers, but 1,200 suppliers. The advisor that has three portals, three supplier sets, and no unified way to answer the question is really what we built. It was designed to do just that. And I don't think it's a flaw in the industry. I don't think anything is broken. I think the industry has evolved. And 10 years ago, most everyone had one TSD agreement. And if I've got one TSD, I've only got access to their suppliers, then their portal is the best thing for me. But as that has evolved significantly to that 2.8 number that we talked about, there wasn't a tool like that up until recently.
So is that the reason, and maybe even double click on this, you talk about that this invisibility factor has also led to infrastructure failure because people are not picking the right things?
I think the invisibility issue is less a failure and more of an opportunity. So the revenue loss is invisible, which is really hard to ignore at this point. A supplier wins 60% of the deals that they get in front of them. So a lot of times leadership generally celebrates that win rate. Nobody asks how many deals never got in front of them because the advisor didn't know they existed. That's the real number. In a transactional model, there's no mechanism to serve that today. There's no mechanism, to surface that. This mismatch shows the invisibility gap. There are suppliers that, for a variety of different reasons, just they're not seen. And that's what we built, was a tool to uncover not just new suppliers, but new technologies.
When you think about the hyperscaler place, right, the entire segment now driven by they're beyond hyperscalers, right? So they have incredible listing, incredible feedback. When you come out of that segment, look at something like a G2, which is mid-market SMB software listing. Then you have AppDirect for enterprise. Isn't there a directory system that exists into this space at all?
Each TSD built what we call the channel companion, and that's what this was designed to do, because it doesn't exist today. It's this wild gap in suppliers were going to events, they were participating, they were spending MDF, they were in the right place, hoping it was the right time. Maybe if I meet Sugata now when he needs my service in 6 months, maybe. This really all stemmed from this concept that when people started working with us on a consultant basis, they wanted what my thesis was is they wanted us to introduce them to partners. But it turns out I wasn't right. What they really wanted was for us to introduce them to their ideal partner profile. And I ran down that for a while and I realized, no, actually, what the suppliers that we're working with were asking for was for us to introduce them to their ideal partner profile at what I call the inflection point, the very moment they are in a meeting where my services as a supplier might be needed. And of course, there's 12,000 roughly supply or trusted advisor companies. I don't have everyone's calendar. I don't know what meetings they're running. How do I analyze that? And then we built a tool for that visibility. We built a tool for the trusted advisor to surface the right supplier at the right time.
So from an overall ecosystem wise, you have roughly about 800 suppliers and about 12,000 advisors. And from install base wise, it's across the board, right? SMB, mid-market, enterprise, everybody.
Correct.
And how does those numbers are really about the US. What about when you start going greater Americas or Europe or Asia? How does that play out?
So the TSD channel ended 2025 at about 16 billion in revenue. We will end 2035 at about 100 billion if the analysts are right. And you and I have broken bread with the same people. You know who we're talking about. I suspect the data is fairly on point. They know what they're doing. Interestingly enough, the TSDs, I would say, and I think they would agree, have had moderate success globally. So the industry, the TSD market, this buying channel has been around in the States for 25 years. The easy next move was Canada, and I think they have found moderate success. There's different rules and regulations in different parts of the world, which creates some complexities. A couple of them moved to Europe. I believe only one of them has European resources actually on the ground today. I think one or two of them moved to Australia. I don't think any of them have resources. It's a tough model to help people understand. And because of the payment structure to the advisors, it's also a long road to success. When you get over the hump, there's so much opportunity financially. But until you get over the hump, it's a lot of ramen noodles, living in your parents' basement, sacrificing a lot of things. There's just not a lot of people. It takes a unique trait to be willing to grind it out the way in which these advisors have built their businesses. And while it has been successful in other parts of the world, it has not seen the success globally that it has here domestically.
So let's double click on the word that you used a couple of minutes ago, channel companion, and sort of the data-driven advisory model that you're trying to build. Can you explain a little bit what that is? How do you aggregate? How do you keep it refined? And who is the primary user of this intelligence? How do you engage? I'd love to know more.
That's a great question. I appreciate the ask. So I would say the godfathers of this industry, there's two gentlemen that come to mind, and they used to refer to this industry as the three-legged stool. And for us to win as an industry, all three legs need to be firmly planted. That's the trusted advisor, that is the supplier, and that is the TSD. And I think, admittedly, anyone that's been in the industry for more than a few years would tell you that we have wobbled on that stool over the years, leaning one direction or the other, like the wind as the season changes. what we wanted to build was a platform for the ecosystem, a platform that would concretely plant the legs of the stool in a level fashion, where if I'm an advisor, I win, the supplier and the TSD win, and that works across the whole ecosystem. So we built a platform that has roughly 1,200 suppliers in the ecosystem. And I think we're going to AI, so maybe I'll start that conversation for us. Every meeting that we're in, whether we know it or not, has some level of AI listening. I've got a Claude device right here that I use when I'm on the go. I use Granola, I use Fathom, other people use Read AI. And for those of you that are like, no, I'm in these meetings, I'm on these Zoom calls and there's nothing going on, I would see it. The answer is no. Granola hides in the background. And all of them automatically are ingested, if you want, into your CRM. And what we found is that's about the only use case. We're just doing it because it feels like the right thing to do. What we have decided to do is we ingested all 1,200 suppliers. We stripped all the sales and marketing material. We created a mechanism where an advisor could identify the right supplier and request a quote from them through the platform to the TSDs. The deal flow is the same. We figured out a way to build automation so all of the right contacts are always in there. All the right sales and marketing material is always in there. But that's only as valuable as our ability to give the advisor the right information on who that supplier is. And so you can drop meeting notes in, you can drop transcripts in. We have an automated way in which your Granola or Zoom or Fathom can automate into our platform. We take all of the context from all of your customer meetings with that one customer, and we start making recommendations on suppliers based on that data. We give you questions to ask to further qualify the opportunity. I pulled one up today giving a TSD a demo of our platform. I went in, I documented with our platform that I wanted to have 2 conversations with the client, unified communications and SD-WAN. The platform put those right at the top and gave me all the questions to ask to qualify those. But because they know the customer, they also gave me 20, I believe the answer was 29 other solutions, other technologies that might be a fit for that same customer. And then it tells me at scale, the customer's billing about $64,000 a month. And my conversations that I thought I was going in to talk about were only $5,900 a month of that 60 plus thousand. So we then give you all the tools, all the resources, all the questions to ask to qualify other technologies and then find the suppliers there as well.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about the economics, the business model behind this. Who is this for free? Who pays for it? Or is it a premium service? Like, how does this whole thing work?
You make me feel like I should be Oprah Winfrey right now. And I say, you get the platform and you get the platform and you, monetization model is simple. We have gotten 6 and 7 figure offers for premium placement from suppliers because that's the way the world of technology works. Our business model, we have been wildly concrete and we have been consistent. There are 3 different offers for suppliers. Whether you're a paid supplier or not, you are already in the platform because we only provide value if we provide every single supplier in the ecosystem. So all 1,200 of you listening that are suppliers trying to figure out, how do I get on the platform? You're already there. There is data that we provide. There are some updates that we provide. There's no paid placement. There's no preferred anything. What you pay in the $1,000, $2,500 or $5,000 packages is data. We don't exchange advisor information with suppliers ever. We have a very strict privacy policy. If the advisor specifically says, I'd like a quote, then we request that quote, but only provide the information that the advisor chooses to pass forward to the TSD or the supplier. 3 very simple packages. They're on our website. The advisors are there for free. Anyone can go, anyone can poke around, anyone can punch in a domain and see what they're missing. Go find an existing customer, look at what you sold them, and then look at the potential to sell them other things. And we've spent 18 months ish on this, and our roadmap, we'll talk next year. Our roadmap is wild. What we have plans to develop, what we're in development for, the features, the functionality, the value. But what we built was this everyone wins mentality. Is if we can tell the advisor who the right suppliers are, give them the tools to sell more with more suppliers, the suppliers win. And the advisors win because they're selling more faster. And the TSDs win because they're driving more revenue through the model. It has been, we dreamt this up. We kept iterating. We've got a handful of folks in the business that are outsiders. And the value that is seen by every leg of the stool has been overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly positive. And we did a beta test for quite a while, and we've publicly been launched for a short period of time. We've yet to turn on the marketing engine. And while we don't release public numbers, I will tell you the number of advisors and suppliers that are in the system far surpassed our expectations. We planned, but we didn't expect.
That's quite amazing. So I want to go back to with the sort of the central point that I started with based on your writing, is that you talked about channel has been focusing on transactions versus relationship. So tell us a little bit about this new platform that you're bringing in. How does it allow an advisor or even a supplier to focus more on relationship than just transaction?
That's a really interesting question. We have built tools to help the transactions move faster. I'll give you a perfect example. Got someone in the business who overheard me in a conversation a couple weeks ago. One of our staff members, a coworker, I guess this was maybe 2 months ago, and on a Zoom call, the supplier said, "This is an amazing tool. I don't know why we would do as many events in 2026 if there was a tool out there that fundamentally introduced us to the advisor, ultimately the client, at the right moment." And it was not, I had no idea how to respond. It was the first time I'd heard that. It was the first time I had even thought that. And when I got off the phone, I don't remember how the conversation ended, because I immediately called them back after someone walked in my office and said, "Hey, that guy's totally wrong. You still go do the events. You just get more strategic about the events that you do. Now you can focus more on the relationship, and we've got a whole channel manager platform for the supplier community that we haven't even talked about, but it allows you to focus more on the relationships, more on, hey, Sugata, how was the Disney trip? And did you go to that steakhouse? And how's your family? And it's less on, hey, Sugata, I'm just calling to check in, because the product development, the transaction is now behind the scenes. You're going to call me to transact when you know I'm the right fit as a supplier. Now we're just calling to play golf, go have steak, go grab a drink, develop the relationship. So when you call me, that trust, that relationship is built. So I actually like to think that we've automated some of the transaction so you can focus on the relationship.
That's fantastic. That's in alignment. I think that's happening at a broader industry level, that as we all deploy these AI tools, so the busy work or the sad work that we have to do, will hopefully dissipate, and we can focus on the human in front of us versus the computer in front of us.
I'll give you an example. I know there's just such a small subset of the population that's using AI the way I'm using AI, but we had an offsite yesterday, and I had to plan for that offsite. It was like 5, 6 hours of the day. So I just put AI in motion. I had 3 or 4 projects set to run. So when I got back, that Excel spreadsheet was completely reorganized and it had searched the web for the missing information. That concept that was nothing more than an idea on my head, I used Whisperflow, talked into my computer for 10 minutes and said, give me a visual of what it is that I'm thinking about. So when I get back, I can refine it. All of these things allowed me to go be fully present in the offsite because I knew the work was getting done.
You said very few people are using it. So can you give us a sense in the TSD channel? What is your sense of adoption of AI? Where is it happening? At the edges, at the core, shadow AI? What is going on there?
Yeah, so this is nothing more than a relatively half-baked thesis. I moved from Phoenix to Minnesota 13 years ago. I've not used this analogy, but you just made me think of it. And when I moved here, respectfully, I felt like I had stepped back in time from a technological perspective. I had moved from a, I'll call Phoenix a coastal town. We were just next door to California, and we were leading edge. If California is bleeding edge, we were leading edge. And when I moved here, some of the conversations I was used to having were not conversations I had because the Midwest, maybe minus Chicago, had not adopted technology at the pace the coast had, either coast. Most of my conversations with advisors, and I'll speak for myself and probably the rest of the team, are more about using ChatGPT to ask what the weather is in Philadelphia, or what's the average price of a Nextiva seat, or I've got a podcast tomorrow. I've got a hall full of closet full of clothes. What's the right attire to wear? Here's the setting. But I think a very small subset of people in the channel, and for what it's worth, the people that are, I'm fascinated with the way in which they're doing it. I talked to someone the other day, and it like half of what he was doing 6 months ago is now done by an AI platform. But I walk into my office in the morning and I can open up Claude and say good morning, and to I have programmed Claude to go pull information, tell me about my day, give me a little insight into the people that I am meeting with that day, talk to me about any one-on-ones that I have, unresolved questions from last week from that one-on-one, and then give me some analytics and some data that I want every morning so I can compare it to yesterday. But I don't actually compare it. Claude compares it because I have asked it to. And then it asks me, what are your 3 objectives for the day that I don't know about? And then I type that in, and then it tells me the 1, 2, or 3 that it can do, so I can go focus more on relationships, so I can go focus on the things that are important. And that may be the middle of the day, which happened this morning when my daughter's prom dress made it home from the tailor and she wanted to try it on. I had all these things going on in the background. I didn't worry about it. I can walk away for 15 minutes. And again, I know the work's still getting done. In short, I think the adoption is still fairly low. I will run through walls to teach people about the power of AI right now because of the impact it has made on our ability as a business to execute. I'll give you a really cheesy example. I get a text from my mom maybe a month ago. She said, "Hey, can you take a look at this resume?" And it's her neighbor's son who has a little kid and needs a job and I think just got laid off. And I said, "Hey, tell me a little bit about this individual, what they're looking for, and any intel that you can offer." I put his resume into AI. I added that paragraph. I reminded my AI platform that they were a world renowned, global award winning resume writer that built resumes that got people $1 million jobs. And they built it around AI or AIO and SEO for the purposes of getting it through applicant tracking systems. And then I finished my call, and about 3 minutes later, I sent my mom that text. I said, "Hey, here's your guy's resume. Let me know what I can do." She called me in a panic. She said, "Who did that?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "How did you do that?" I do that countless times a week because nobody seems to be using it. And I'm not doing anything earth shattering, but I'm trying to.
So,
But
Eric,
I,
looking at your background, you worked your way up to the highest sort of sales leadership level, CRO, CXO. You're advising CRO, CXO. The transformation you just described over the last year, when we were hanging out and things that you were talking about today, they're not ideas anymore. You have built these micro habits. I watch you on LinkedIn when you multitask, and not every person can do that. And when you look at organization, they're a collection of habits and they're called cultures tied to processes and etc. So one of your favorite topic is in this age of transformation, culture is going to play a major role. So can you share a little bit on what are you seeing, what's getting in the way, what's helping companies to accelerate when it comes to culture? And then of course, we're going to go to your favorite topic, which is leadership.
culture is fascinating to me. This industry, and listen, I speak about this industry as if I know others. I know this industry. So those of you that are listening that are outsiders, likely experience the same thing. People follow people. It's really that simple. I have watched people chase leaders because they're good people. They're people first individuals. I'll give you two quick examples. I gave a keynote at an event probably 6, 8 months ago. I think I was in Charlotte, and one of the other speakers got up, and her and I've since become more than acquaintances, maybe not quite friends. But she gets up and she said, "I walked into my boss's office and I decided it was time. I needed to come clean." And he got off the phone and I looked him in the eyes and I said, "I need you to know that I have been contemplating suicide for months and I almost did it today." She said, we talked back and forth for 2, maybe 3 minutes. And he looked at me and he said, "I have a meeting. Can we pick this up after lunch?" And I was like, What the hell kind of culture is that?" Because I will tell you, I have been in similar situations where I have heard those phone calls, and as little as I want to be late for my next meeting doesn't matter anymore. That's the person, that literally life or death situation. That is how you define your culture, is how you respond in moments like that. I will tell you the inverse of that is I had another woman share a story and I experienced something similar. Maybe I'll share mine briefly. My sister-in-law passed away unexpectedly in 2020 due to alcohol addiction. And my boss at the time called me and moved mountains. And it didn't matter if I came back for 4 months. Everything was fine. Go care for your wife, go care for your family. The same happened. I had a woman share a story that she walked into her boss's office. She was new to the job. And she said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I just found out this morning my mom's not going to make it through the day. And I need to get on a plane and go out of town." And he pulled his wallet out. She says, "Eric, I hardly knew him." And he took out his company credit card. And "What is this?" "You need to go see your mom." Put it on the credit card. She said, "Eric, I didn't have a dollar and never thought that would happen." And she said, in hindsight, as a leader herself now, all these years later, it was exactly the right thing to do. And I said, "Do you still talk to him?" She said, "Eric, I still work for him. I would never consider leaving." But that is how you create a positive culture. And not to bring this back to AI, but when you've got the tools around you to do some of the minutia, no different than now I can go focus as a channel manager more on the advisors and building relationships. Now's a prime opportunity for me as a person in the office. Leadership is a choice. Now is a prime opportunity for me to go spend more time with the people around me.
When you look at the changes that we're hearing in the news, whether it's Oracle or Amazon and these large companies, right? They're going through massive reduction in headcount because they got to stay in the game. They have to invest. I'm not justifying either way the narrative that they're sharing. There is a high level of anxiety, and I can also sense in our own employee base, because as you drive up productivity, if you don't have demand, you have capacity. You can't have people sitting idle while others are working away. So you have to make these very difficult choices. So at this moment, when it comes to leadership, you talk a lot about empathy and transparency and humility. It seems like that's the moment of the day that leaders need to be upfront, saying, I don't even know 6 months or 9 months down the road what this productivity really looks like and how many of you are going to be in this team or in the game, or how this is going to be structured, because for the organization to survive and then succeed, it needs to transform. So what is your take as you're like looking at company size wise, a 50-person company or a 250 or a 5,000? Can you share a little bit about what you're hearing from the employee base and what you're hearing from the leadership? Because this is a struggle on both dimensions. It's not one or the other.
I think on the leadership side, it's important to be wildly transparent. Now, what I'm not saying is if you as a leader know there's a massive layoff coming and it's tomorrow, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your family and to the company, and you probably have an NDA and all that. You can't just go let the cat out of the bag. But if someone says, in fact, oh, Rich McBee, I'm going to call him out by name. It's been enough time I can do this. I got to know Rich McBee through a family member many moons ago. He was the CEO at Mitel. And then I bumped into Rich McBee a couple years later at a ShoreTel sales kickoff. They had just announced their acquisition of ShoreTel. It was not finalized yet. And I reintroduced myself. He remembered me, which I think says a lot about him as an individual. But I said, Rich, I've got 7 children. Is this acquisition about the people or the intellectual property? And he said, Eric, we're buying the assets, which was very vague. It's not what I needed. And I asked him again, and he clarified with a bit of ambiguity. I walked away knowing very clearly I needed to go find a job. This acquisition is going to close and we're all going to get let go. I interviewed a woman, Chris Shipley, on my podcast, I don't know, 4 years ago. And Chris, if you're listening, I'm really sorry. The conversation was fine. It seemed naive on her part to articulate the message. The book was called The Adaptation Advantage, and the argument was the future of work is not about the resume that you have. It's about your ability to adapt to the changes that are coming. It sounded ridiculous. It really did. What do you mean adaptable? I've been doing this 26 years. Who's not going to hire me if I need a job? But the question that you're asking is about job security around adaptability. I've got bills. I'll go squish sour cream and Taco Bell burritos if I have to. But it's your willingness to adapt when the world is adapting around you, and the world is adapting very quickly. And probably not the most corporate thing to say, but we have a responsibility to care for our families first. You're going to have a mortgage. In fact, it's nearly the first of the month. You have a mortgage, it's due. And if you're concerned, figure out a way to not be concerned. And maybe that's be more adaptable. Maybe that's learn a new AI tool. Maybe that's changing careers. But I think everyone's concerned on some level. And I think it's reasonable to be so in most cases.
In some are built for struggle, some are built to deal with stress. Some get hardened over the years, but some, like the rest of us, we have to learn, right? That skill. And in your book, and you have talked about, you posted quite a bit, this notion of you are enough. So at this moment, to me, seems that's such a relevant statement, because things are happening at such a fast pace. We will not be able to control everything, despite our best effort, right? So how do we step back? And what does those three words really mean that we can reflect upon, that you're enough?
Interesting to come full circle on this question. The title of the book came as I was leaving my sister-in-law's funeral. We were pulling out of, this sounds terrible, you've got to know our family, but we went to the funeral in Phoenix, and we were driving all the way back to where we live in Minnesota. And we had promised the kids ice cream at our favorite ice cream place, 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽𝗀. So we're leaving 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽𝗀, and my wife said to me, I was making a right-hand turn. I remember exactly where I was. She said, I just wish she knew. And I knew that my wife was talking about her sister, but I had no idea what the context was. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, I wish my sister knew that she was enough. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I just wish through all the turmoil, through all the challenges that her 31 years had, that she just knew that she was enough just as she was. And I talk to people on our recruiting business all the time that are looking for work, and I can hear the self-reflection in their voice. I can hear the confusion of, Eric, I've been there 15 years, but they're just a number when it comes to a layoff in most cases. And we all start to question our worthiness at moments where life is really hard. Miscarriages, foreclosures, a estranged relationship with my oldest. She's 25. I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter I've never met. I've not talked to my daughter in 9 years. And someone from your show listening right now will reach out to me and tell me that they have the same story. We're not alone. And I think we often think we're going through this job loss, through the miscarriage, through the estrangement alone. But even if we are, it doesn't change the fact that we were uniquely and wonderfully made. And just as we are, we're enough. And we're going to be better on the other side of it. And more often than not, that is the case. You've got a better job, bigger title, more money. You made sacrifices. I've got a buddy of mine looking to move across the country because he can't find a job here. And he was terrified when we got on the phone. And I think when we got off the phone, he had the realization that, see, maybe this is just where I'm supposed to be. Maybe this is all happening for a reason. And that suffering, it just makes you stronger. No, it doesn't make paying the mortgage any easier, but I would say avoid it as much as you can, become adaptable, but we're all going to go through stuff. All of us.
And Eric, you've been there for a lot of people. I watch you, how you constantly promote positions and people that are in transition. Thank you for doing that. It is great to hear about the platform that you're pulling together to build an ecosystem. I'd love to have you back. 45 minutes just flew by. It's always amazing to talk to you, but thank you for being here.